Baltimore never seemed like a place where one could easily disappear into the crowd. Every corner, every house felt like it had its own soul piercing through you, trying to uncover your secrets. I had come here from New York, hoping to find peace in a place where not every building reminded me of crimes. But Baltimore, this city seemed to exhale history, and part of that history was already seeping into my dreams like a poisonous gas. My name was Sarah Miller, and I had been a detective for over 10 years. In New York, I had seen everything: murdered families, ritual killings, serial killers, that people used to scare their children. But nothing could have prepared me for what awaited me in Baltimore. When the first disappearances started coming into our precinct, it didn't seem out of the ordinary. In big cities, someone is always going missing: teenagers running away from home, addicts lost in search of a fix, the homeless wandering off in search of a better life. But something about these cases was different. Young professionals, people you would never expect to see on a missing persons list, were vanishing without a trace, without any connection between them, and that's what alarmed me. Each new disappearance felt like a blow to the nerves. They came without warning, with precision and calculation, as if someone was meticulously planning every detail. I saw my colleagues trying to link it to ordinary cases, but my instincts told me this was something much darker than I could imagine. I took the case myself, and the deeper I delved, the stronger the feeling grew that this was something far more sinister than I could have ever prepared for. One evening, while reviewing reports and analyzing evidence, I received a strange package. It was an exquisite, richly decorated box, clearly expensive and beautifully wrapped. Instinct told me to be cautious, but something inside me, perhaps a wild mix of curiosity and fear, compelled me to open it. Inside was a collage of photographs. Each missing person was depicted with meticulous detail, and among the images was an elegant handwritten note: "The hunt is as thrilling as the hunter. H." I read the note over and over, each letter carving itself into my mind like a knife. H. I knew who it was. This couldn't be true, but my intuition screamed otherwise. Hannibal Lecter. A character from books born on the pages of Thomas Harris. But what if it wasn't just fiction? What if he somehow managed to step into reality? I immediately raised the alarm, but my colleagues looked at me with puzzlement, some even openly laughing. Hannibal Lecter. In real life, it sounded absurd, but something in my bones told me it was true. I decided to act on my own, despite the mockery and disbelief from my superiors. I began my own investigation. I studied everything I could find about Lecter: his methods, his psychological profile, his tendencies, his tastes. Nights were spent reading books, watching films, analyzing every move he made as described in the novels. The more I learned, the clearer it became he was real. He was in Baltimore, and he was watching me. My first real lead came from a surveillance camera recording. A tall man, well-dressed, with a distinctive gait, entered an expensive restaurant. I froze in front of the screen, zooming in as much as I could. The face was obscured, but the contours, they were so familiar. And I knew it was him. This restaurant, an elite establishment, was known for its exquisite cuisine and private club of regular clients. I entered under the guise of a patron, pretending to be interested in gourmet art, and struck up a conversation with the maitre d'. I learned that Dr. Fell, new to the city, had quickly become a regular, and his manners and taste in wine were undeniably exceptional. Dr. Fell. This name kept coming up in my investigation. The name Lecter used in Florence. My heart raced, and I asked for a meeting with the doctor. Of course, I was discreetly accommodated, and within a few days the meeting was arranged. When the day came, I stood in front of an elegant townhouse, staring at the doors that seemed like the gates to hell. The door opened, and there stood a tall man with piercing eyes and a polite smile. Detective Miller. I presume his voice was smooth and calming, but everything inside me screamed in fear. Please, come in. The interior of the house was exactly as I had imagined it: art on the walls, antiques, the scent of exquisite cuisine lingering in the air. He gestured to a chair and offered me a glass of wine, which I accepted, trying to remain composed. "I've been expecting you." His eyes gleamed like a predator finding its prey. I sat down, feeling my insides tighten with terror. Thousands of scenarios of how this could end spun through my head, but none of them gave me hope for salvation. I took the glass, trying to keep a straight face, though my hands were trembling. "You won't get away with this," I said. But my voice betrayed me, sounding too weak. He smiled, as if he knew it was a lie. "Oh, but I already have. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" He leaned in closer, his eyes piercing through me. "The game has begun, detective. Shall we start?" I realized I was in the middle of a nightmare I had created for myself. I wasn't just hunting a killer, I had become his next victim, his new target in a deadly game. Lecter raised his glass as if to toast the beginning of this nightmare. I felt a cold chill envelop my body. At that moment, I understood the full depth of the horror. Hannibal Lecter was real, and he had come for me. Now I had to survive in his world, a world where every step was calculated, every move deadly. I knew one thing: the hunt had begun, and I couldn't afford to lose. But my chances were slim. Time seemed to slow down. We sat across from each other like players on a chessboard, with life itself at stake. The house was quiet, the faint hum of the city outside like the distant background of unobtrusive music. "I offer you a game." Sarah, his voice was soft, almost tender. "If you can catch me, you'll free everyone who's still alive. If not..." He didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. I had to either become the hunter or remain the prey. And this was an art he had mastered. I suppose I wasn't even surprised when he suggested we continue our meeting on his terms. He knew I would agree. After all, I had no choice. Or maybe I had too many choices, but they all led to the same outcome: death. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the table in my apartment, studying every detail, every fine print on the paper, every flourish on that damn note. I tried to find a way to outplay him, to outsmart him, to come out of this game as the victor. But with each passing minute, I realized that this game was designed for me to lose. He knew all my weaknesses, all my fears, and he was going to use them against me. Every step forward felt like stepping onto a minefield, but I kept moving, knowing that the only chance to win was not to stop. I followed his trail like a hunter closing in on their prey, but deep down I knew it was him, leading me where he wanted. The meeting took place in an abandoned building somewhere on the outskirts of the city. Lecter, as always, was elegant, his manner betraying no hint of concern. He was as cold-blooded as a beast ready to pounce. We talked about many things: art, life, death. He skillfully twisted every word I said, turning it into a knife that stabbed into my soul. But then I noticed something that struck my mind like lightning. He wasn't omnipotent. A flicker of something I hadn't seen before crossed his eyes. Maybe it was fatigue, maybe regret. In that moment, I realized he was human too, with his own fears and weaknesses. This gave me hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I could outsmart him. That perhaps I had a chance to win, and made up my mind. I set up a trap that seemed like my only way out. I knew I was risking everything, but I had no other choice. That night, when I arrived at the designated place, I held onto the hope that I could change my fate. And when Hannibal Lecter walked into the room, I knew my plan had worked. He was trapped. But instead of panicking, he smiled. "Congratulations." Sarah's voice was quiet, but there was a note of respect in it. "You've won." But his smile didn't fade. And then I realized that perhaps I hadn't fully understood what winning this game meant. We both stood on the edge of an abyss, and someone had to fall. When it was all over, I walked out onto the street. The cold air hit my face, but I could still smell his cologne, the smell of blood that lingered on my hands. I didn't know if I would ever be able to forget what had happened. But one thing was clear: the hunt was over, and I was alive. But the price I had paid was too high. The silence of the night was broken by the distant sound of police sirens. Somewhere far away, perhaps in another part of the city, someone was rejoicing in life, unaware that monsters lurked in this silence. But at that moment, I was ready to embrace any noise, just to never hear his voice again. I looked at the empty street, and the thought that the real hunt had just begun gnawed at me. Because deep down, I knew Hannibal Lecter might disappear, but his traces would remain forever. And now I lived with that shadow, knowing that one day I might have to become the hunter again, or the victim.